Hallo und herzlich willkommen zum Creationship Podcast, heute auf Englisch. Hello and welcome to the Creationship Podcast, today in English. My name is Annalena and together with my boyfriend and business partner Raimo, we host this podcast, we do coaching programs and we talk a lot about relationships, business and spirituality and how everything is connected together. And today we have an amazing interview for you with one of our mentors, Helen and Harville, and they gave us a very different perspective on relationships. Relationships are there that you can see, feel, and heal your childhood wounds and grow and evolve together as a couple. So it is so much more than just having a nice connection, not being by yourself in your life, but really evolving and growing and healing together. And we found their work when we were flying the last time to Mexico, so about 1.5 years ago. And Raimo saw an interview on the board program from Marie Folio. And at the end, she was asked if she has a book recommendation. And she recommended the book of Helen and Harville, Getting the Love You Want, and said it saved her marriage. So Raimo was really excited, and when we got off the plane, he immediately downloaded their book, started reading it, and said to me, "Oh my God, Annalena, you have to read this. There is even so much more to relationships than we thought and we learned before. We have to dig deeper into this." So first we did one seminar workshop with Helen Harville, then another one. We keep studying all the theory, we keep practicing it, and we also use it for the work with our clients. So you really have to watch this interview, take some notes, be inspired. If you like the interview, please share it with your friends and family. And if you love what you heard also from us, then you can follow us. The content, unfortunately, is mostly in German, but we also coach in English. So we wish you a lot of fun, a lot of inspiration, and a great new perspective on relationships. So a happy and very warm welcome to our guest of today. We are so delighted. We are so happy to welcome you in our podcast. Dear Helen, dear Harville, thank you so much for your time. And we're looking so forward to sharing all your knowledge and all your experience, all your insights with our audience today. Welcome to the Creationship Podcast.
Thank you. We're delighted to be here.
And honored, truly.
Thank you. So we already explained a little bit how we stumbled about or across your work. So, and it is just when you dive a little bit into the facts, it's just blowing my or our mind, because your joint work, and this is so beautiful because we also have a lot of couples that either work together or are going to work together in their company. And your joint work really evolved from the decades, from, I would say, a typical couple therapy to a really huge social movement. And when we dive a little bit into the numbers, you have hundreds or thousands of Imago therapists working around the world with your work. You have several workshops, training programs, 10 international best-selling books, 3 New York Times bestsellers, several appearances at Oprah, speeches for big companies like Google. And what I really want to highlight is you are married for over 30 years, have 6 children and 6 grandchildren, if the information is right on the internet. And now my question is, what is your constant drive to work together and make this wonderful and beautiful work? And what motivates you every single day since decades to do this together?
Oh, can I go first?
Sure.
The answer, I actually go to sleep at night knowing we could relieve so much suffering in the world if we could only get our work even broader. Because people, in a marriage especially, they want to love each other. They've married each other for all the right reasons, and they want to do everything they can, but they haven't been taught how how to do it, we can teach them. So any opportunity such as the one you're giving us, Harville and I are just really honored. Please listen to what this couple says, and then share it with others, because there's every single person who's ever married, they can have a joyful relationship with one of our phrases is with full aliveness. They can have a happy marriage. And it doesn't take that much effort. We can do it. Anyone can do it.
So, what I was thinking about what motivates me to get up every day and do this for. We've actually been married for 40 years.
40 years now. Okay.
We have to update the
website.
Website, and that we've been working together for those 40 years in a variety of different capacities, co-creating the system, co-writing the book, getting it out, co-leading workshops. And I've often also asked myself, why am I not on vacation? why am I not going to a beach? Or I love motorhoming. Why are we not in motorhomes? And I think a part of it is, to be honest, I have to be a little bit unclear about why. But I do know this, that I think Helen agrees with this. We talked about this yesterday, that somehow we didn't really choose to do this. Mm-hmm. That it was more like we got co-opted by something, the universe or the collective consciousness or something, so that it has a feeling of being called, not choosing a career, but being called to a vocation. Mm-hmm. And the vocation for both of us, from the time we were young, I think mine started actively, professionally at about 17, when I became the pastor of a church as a teenager. And Helen was very involved in the church also as a teenager. So that our backgrounds were in doing something for others, doing ministry, getting messages out. And over the years, our message has changed from the general spiritual, religious messages to relational messages because it's how do people live together. And I think the second thing is that in being curious about a relationship, we've discovered some things that seem uniquely effective in helping people have better relationships. And so the feedback is what you're putting stuff into the field, and it's giving something back saying, hey, that worked, that's good. So that's a motivation that I think drove our curiosity and our creativity to keep going. And then what's driving us now at what I would consider our sort of old age is that one day about 10, maybe 15 years ago, we had a conversation in which we agreed that what we were doing locally in the clinic, working with couples, could in fact...
In therapy offices.
In therapy offices, that you could take a piece of that called the Dialog process, which was the central operating mechanism, out of the clinic and out of couples therapy, and insert it into the world, into any relationship, in business, in religion, in corporations, parents and children, schools, teacher-pupil relation, that it would work anywhere, that if you improved the quality, and this is a simple thing, if you improve the quality of conversation, to move it from conflict and polarization to connecting and safety, that you change people fundamentally. They go through not just a change, but a transformation, because hardly anybody on the planet feels safe. and that one of the most dangerous things that people engage in is talking. One of the most dangerous things is talking, because we don't know how to talk without polarizing. So if we could change that simple thing about how people talk so they would experience safety, then we would eventually begin to change civilization itself. So so then we move to, well, let's take that on. And well, that's 7.8 billion people. Well, that's then we started studying a tipping point philosophy and methodology, and discovered you don't have to help everybody to help everybody, but you do have to help 25 to 30%. And when you reach a 25 to 30% saturation point, the rest of everybody follows, or at least 75% of the remaining people follow. You'll always have 10 or 15% of people who will object to the changes, but it will be so big that you'll actually change then the very value system of civilization itself. And you could do it with inserting one new way to talk called dialogue, and remove monologue and replace it with dialogue, and insert that into the culture. So we took it on, and that's what we're doing. And I think that's what gets me up every morning is, okay, we got 3.8 billion people to go. So I think that yesterday we didn't get any. Tomorrow we have to get 100,000 or something like that. And then you have to be creative to know how to do that. And so, because nobody knows how to do it, so you have to invent it all the time, and invent new things and find new people with new ideas. So that's sort of what drives me every morning. And Helen is a social visionary with enormous success in doing global social movements. So I follow her.
So Harville one day said, let's get this. In addition to being in therapy offices, let's get the wisdom out of therapy offices and let therapists do and let's create an organization, call it Safe Conversations. It's for everybody, and we can transform humanity all over the world, because Imago Therapy is in 61 countries. And so there are Imago therapists there. We've just come back from a week in South Korea, and they want it in the whole country. So thank you for having us on. But basically, it's said, we could say it very simply. What are the tools that are in the Imago Therapy offices that we want to share with the world? And we could do that pretty simply.
Okay.
Yes,
okay,
I mean this.
So that's the driver. Is the vision, the mission, and the need.
And we could just we could just describe about 4 or 5 things, and that's the answer to a transformed relationship.
This would be beautiful, because we already introduced a little bit of your principles into the podcast. We shared that we do the no negativity rule every evening, that we also share 3 appreciations about every night before we go to bed, as you told us basically in the workshop. And also, if we get the switch, we also switch into the Imago Dialog. But if you could, in your own words, to the listeners that didn't catch up any about, okay, what is the magic behind Imago? Why does it work? Why is it also for couples, but also you do it also business, safe conversations, also for business teams and everything. So if you could dive a little bit for us, for the listeners, into the principles.
Yeah, why don't I start with the new definition of relationship?
But let's precede that by saying, according to businesses, we see it now for everybody. Businesses, religion, schools, education, and couples. So it's extended from couples to the whole of any ecosystem can benefit from the dialogue process.
And any house of worship, anywhere that. Jewish temple asked us to present it. So Yom Kippur in September, they ask each other, but we ask each other for forgiveness, but then we don't quite know what does that mean? And it's gotten sort of wooden, and no one's life is really changed by doing it. And we have been doing presentations in synagogues, and they love now the
Beautiful.
way to. And so, yeah, it belongs everywhere: businesses, educational institutions.
Okay. So you're going to start with the magic
This
of
is a
Imago.
prolegomena. We have a new definition of a relationship. People think, oh, I know what a relationship is, Helen. Everyone knows what a relationship is. Well, ours is a little different. We are very specific to say a relationship is two people and the space between them. And sometimes people go, well, that's dumb. There's nothing there. Actually, there's an energy field. And when the energy field feels safe to the other person, two people can connect.
Mm-hmm.
Can you connect with me? Now, if Harville...
Are you saying this is safe?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And demonstrating it, not just saying it. Now, again, this is for businesses and corporations, but couples, it's the same thing for couples as the businesses, but for couples, going to bed at night, Remo, you mentioned, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Remo, you said give an appreciation. Well, that's, before going to sleep at night, we had a lot of kids, and that's when I had Harville's undivided attention, and I would tell him what he did wrong that day. That's not the right time. Just at night, 3 appreciations. And then also, because then he goes to bed feeling safe with me instead of criticized by me. But also, for me, a big one, Remo, is how Harville looks at me. He can say something with a glare. Oh, and so we teach our couples, are you looking with your partner with a glare or a gaze? And he has 2 pictures on a great big, where the photo is behind us when we do workshops. The glare is a cat, and the gaze is a basset hound. Beautiful, wide pupil. So how, and a warm expression on his face. Just how Harville is looking at me can make a difference on if the space between is safe. So basically, when he glares at me, connection is ruptured. I really don't want to be around someone glaring at me when they're talking. So now we can really begin to unpack what creates safety, because we know what disrupts safety would be criticism, shame, blame, criticism, a glare. Then that needs a so 4 things. Once the couple has split because they don't feel safe, 4 things create safety. And you want to do the 4 things?
All 4, or just start with
why
one?
don't you start?
Well, the core one is what we mentioned before, called the dialogue process, a new way to talk, and it's prior to dialogue, and for all of human history, human beings have done what we call vertical talking. I'm the one who knows what you should know.
And what you should be doing.
I speak to you and tell you what reality is, and you agree with that and do what I say, and things will be okay. But people are unconscious of that. It's not that people want to do that. It's just the way we've done it. And then I will say, well, no, it's my way. So I'll do monologue. You do monologue. I do monologue. Then we disagree, and then polarize, or go our separate ways because we can't connect. But in dialogue, you radically transform the conversational space, in which you move from vertical talking to what we call lateral talking, in which one person talks and the other person listens, and the other person talks and the other person listens. So you take turns talking, and listening. So that makes it the sender, the talker, and the listener equal. This makes the talker superior and the receiver inferior. And this creates anxiety and a lot of other bad feelings. And this creates a sense of equality. And then eventually you experience safety when you're taking turns talking and listening. And I think I'd just like to emphasize that as we work more and more curiously with this, we're discovering that listening has two levels. One is called hearing, and that is when the electromagnetic waves just sort of go by your ear, but they don't go in. Listening is when the waves go in the ear and become a part of your memory system. And that's when you literally listen to and receive the reality of another human being. I can hear you and not get you, but if I listen, you change me because I now have you in my head. But if I just hear you, you don't go inside and I don't change. I just notice that you're out there. So that's the dialogical space that we think is non-negotiable for safety and therefore non-negotiable for transformation in all relationships. And we're teaching it in corporations and, as Helen said, in congregations, and we've taught it in schools as well as with couples. So that's the first major piece is the dialogue process.
Now, what you do, the first step in having a dialogue is to see if the other person is available for a dialogue. Because what we teach is our sentence stems of how to be a dialogical person. And so Harville, should we give an example?
Of a sentence stem?
Well,
sure.
of what dialogue is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is now a good time to give an example about what a dialogue looks like?
So let me see if I've got it. If I got it correctly, you said is now a good time for us to give a demonstration of how to do a dialogue on this podcast. Did I get it?
You got it.
And is there more about that?
Well, yes, I'd like to send a message, and or you can send a message, and I'll mirror back so we can show the second step.
Oh, okay. Well, this was not rehearsed, but we're sort of spontaneous and doing it. So, okay. So instead of telling you what the sentence stems are, we're going to model it for you. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
Model it. So it's now a good time to share with you and to model with you what a dialogue is.
Yes, it's perfect timing. Okay. Now the two people look at each other.
Yes.
I mean, you don't go, yeah, I'll do the dialogue with you. Go ahead, I'm doing something, but I'm listening. No, put everything down.
And that
look
would be
at each other.
That would be an example of hearing, but not listening, because you can't
multitask.
You can't multitask.
Yeah,
and listen at the same time.
When someone asks for an appointment, make them important.
So mirror back what I just said. So that would be an example of hearing rather than listening.
Yes. Of I don't know how to mirror what you said effectively right now.
Okay, so shall I send it again?
Yes.
So when you turned away and gave an example of multitasking, that's what we would call an example of just hearing rather than listening, because you can't listen and multitask.
You can't listen and multitask. Yes. As
You got that.
I just demoed that I was multitasking and I didn't mirror you back correctly.
Yeah, right. So thank you for mirroring that back.
Yes.
And you want to ask me, is there more?
Yes, I think I did. I said, is there more? But should we say the dialogue
let me just say, the more is that I would like for you to send me a message and let me mirror back to you so we can see how we can do this both ways.
Okay. So I'm going to pause and say there are 3 steps to the dialogue. First, mirror the other person and say, did I get it? And is there more about that? And the second thing is to validate, would that make sense? So you have to say to the other person, that makes sense, not because you take their position or you totally agree, it makes sense to them. And if the person that you're talking to hears what you have to say and mirrors it to see if they got it right, it means a great deal to the sender if the receiver, I'm the sender and he's the receiver.
So let me see if I'm getting what you're saying to them,
And so,
which is that if a person is mirroring and they say, is there more about that, that it's also important to move from is there more to validation, in which you see how the other person is thinking.
Which is the second step in the dialogue process.
And that's the second step in the dialogue process.
Validation, and then empathy.
And then the empathy is the third stage in the dialogue process. Am I getting that?
Which is, I can imagine, now that you've said that, I can imagine you feel da-da-da. So, and you fill in the blank.
So in empathy, you imagine how the other person is feeling. Am I getting that?
Okay. And that's where you have to know a little bit about the person's past, or it does help.
Oh, so it helps to do empathy.
There is something called the childhood challenge exercise, and both people talk about what was growing up like, or were there any challenges, and you don't want to replicate that at your workplace or at your house of worship or in your home, in your marriage.
So to experience empathy for a person, it's helpful to know what kind of house did they grow up in? What kind of emotional experience did they have?
And especially the challenging ones.
Especially the challenging ones, so that you can be empathic with them and not repeat with them what happened for them in their childhood. Am I getting that's about empathy?
So those are the 3 steps.
Thanks for sharing those 3 things with me.
3 steps of the dialogue process. Well, you made them up.
Okay. So that was sort of a rough dialogue process, but it was, you can get the fact that it is speaking and being mirrored. And then being validated and empathized with.
And all of this creates safety in the between. And just, we really believe, I don't know if you've been listening to the political system in the United States, but they need help in Washington, D.C. when they debate a bill. One political party goes, there should only be one political party in the United States right now. We don't need 2. But that's, the Constitution says we need 2 political parties. So they aren't doing dialogue. And in Russia and Kiev, this needs to be taught at the UN. So this is what motivates us to get up every morning. And again, spread the word. There is help for anyone, even Putin. If Putin could learn this, there could be there's another way to have power in the world, and it's not killing other people in other countries.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'd like to emphasize about what you said is safety. It's such a simple word and simple thing, and sometimes when we say it, people aren't impacted by it. However, the fact is that our brains have evolved over, I don't know how long we've been here as a human species, but as 3 million years and 300,000 years, more specifically, as communities. The brain's evolution has one goal: not to get killed, to survive, to live. So the brain has 4 receptors in it, and 3 of them are designed to read the environment to see, am I safe here? And if there's danger, there are 3 receptors for danger and 3 options. If there's any danger, I get the hell out of here. Or if I can't get out fast enough, I have to go kill or beat up or whatever, that confront the danger. Or if I can't do that, play dead. Just go passive and resist. And if those 3 receptors aren't receiving any signals, they relax, then the 4th receptor, you only have 1 receptor for pleasure and safety. Then that says, oh, well, now we can go outside and we can play. We don't have to protect ourselves. So that's the vagal ventral system in the brain. So safety is the fundamental human need. After that, everything else is possible. But before then, all we can do is defend ourselves. And that's what we've done for millions of years. And we think that we are now at the point where we've learned enough about not only what humans need, but what we're capable of doing on the positive side of that we could eventually have global safety. And if we did that, the human race would just explode in creativity and in joy. And we think maybe we could make some progress in that direction. We hope in our this is a 30-year project for us. We hope in the 30 years we'll be pretty close to what we would call a relational civilization in which everybody is safe, equal, and equal means all the way up and all the way down, economically, socially, and politically. Diversity is celebrated and everybody's included. Then we're safe. So those 4 new values we think have to be brought in, which is equality, freedom, inclusion, and the celebration of diversity. Then I think we have what we human beings are here for, is to live in joy and peace and thrive. So that's kind of what we're up to, and that's what gets us up in the morning too. That's not so complicated. All you have to do is get everybody to talk differently.
And take turns talking and listening.
Well, that would be the difference, is take turns.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So that we've been going on and on. Maybe you have a comment or a reaction to all of that.
No, it's just to summarize a little bit for the audience. So you explained that you have a different understanding of relationship, means personal, between a marriage, or in business-wise, there are several persons or 2 persons at least, and then there's a space in between. And what you are saying is that it's very important that the space in between feels for both safe, because if it doesn't feel safe, there's either fight or flight, but there's no way basically to connect between them or to have a safe conversation that both can express them, and that the one is the sender and the other one is the listener and not just the hearer. So that really the message from the sender is going into the brain of the other person. And for that, you have 4 principles, and you just explained that one way is to have a safe conversation with, for example, Imago Dialog. Therefore, you say you have to mirror the other. First of all, you have to ask. And this is, for example, something that also we miss sometimes, to really ask the other one, is now a good time? And this is so simple, yes, but it's not easy. And that is with all or most of the Imago processes, it's very simple. It's not, we did a workshop with it, but the steps are very simple, but it's not easy, because it's for the first time, it's feel uncommon. When the audience just think about the first driving lesson that you have, it feels everything is a little bit, oh, and now and there, and oh, now I missed here, looking into the mirror. But if you do it a little bit, then you get into it and it just feels common. But that's just the first. So every listener that was now outside, or audience that thought, a mirror and then and this, it's just getting a little bit used to it, because in the end, it's very simple. So you explain just asking if now a good time, if not, when is a good time. Then the sender brings out a message, the listener just mirrors what he understands and asks if he did understand it right. And yes, then he asks, is there more about? And then he does this process until the end. If there's more or less nothing more to talk about, then he summarizes it in his words. Then he emphasizes with it, or he validates that what the other was saying. He validates, and then he emphasizes with, now I get it. Do you feel that, or do you feel this way when I can now imagine what you want to send me? So what are the other parts you were talking about, which does the Imago?
Well, after you learn to dialogue, or we might say, as a part of deciding to practice dialogue, we think there's a decision that you have to make. And because the purpose of dialogue is safety, and the decision you have to make is what we call zero negativity. Because any negativity ruptures safety and makes the relationship dangerous. And therefore, we'll go then to protect ourselves. But if you have a zero negativity commitment, which we ask everybody to do, whether it's in a business or whether it's in a couple or family, because you can't get what you want and be negative. It's just not possible. Negativity is a toxin that generates cortisol, which is the neurochemical of fear and anxiety. And so we ask people to make that decision. And talking about is simple, but not easy. That is really hard to do.
No, but actually, it sounds much more difficult than it is, because people go, well, that's phony. I don't want to not be able to talk about my problems.
Yeah.
I don't want to be nice all the time when there are problems to solve and the problems are real. So I'm not going to do this system. And so we really need to jump right in and explain what zero negativity is. We can teach anybody. Oh, and by the way, this even works between parents and kids. If their kids are whining and complaining and fussing, our daughter uses it with our grandson. They have 6 kids. And she goes, I'm sorry, Sebastian, I'm not available to hear you whine and complain. Come back, make an appointment to talk to me, and I want you to convert your frustration into a request. What is it that you want? I don't want to hear what you don't want. And so basically, what I just said with the mother and the child is very applicable at work. Say you're on a team at a business and you're in an office and multiple people, and there's someone on the staff that sort of glares at you whenever you walk in. It's the morning and everyone just started the work and they just have a glare, and you as a colleague or a coworker at the office, you don't feel safe around that person. Or maybe the CEO of the company has a glare in his eyes. And we teach anybody who people around them are uncomfortable because they're just glaring. I mean, they're not saying anything negative. They just look negative. First have a different expression on their face. And then if there are problems, and of course there are problems, instead of going up to another person's place of work, in the group office, and going, I've got a real problem with what you said yesterday. And a lot of people heard it. I do not like the way you mentioned what I did at work. I thought I did a good job, and I felt really put down by you. And one of us is going to have to resign. I don't feel comfortable working here with you anymore. Well, instead of that approach, go to the other person and ask for an appointment where they said something yesterday that felt insulting to you, and say, can I tell you about something you said yesterday? And I was a little upsetting, and I'd like to suggest what you could have said that would not have upset me. And basically teach people to move a complaint to a suggestion so the other person will know what to do. You know, you could have worded it this way. And so this is changing a frustration into a request of something, converting a frustration into a request for what the other person hears. It's an opportunity for them to grow.
Yeah.
And grow more professional at work and not just use slang. I mean, maybe someone cusses a lot and the other person is uncomfortable. And but anyway, you can go up to anybody and tell them the word zero negativity. It doesn't mean you stuff down and swallow problems.
Yeah.
You learn to convert problems, frustrations into a request. Then the other person goes, oh, okay, I'll consider doing it that way in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, because every negative statement is actually a frustration. And a frustration, we call it a wish in disguise. So discover what the wish is, because we know how to do frustrations. What we don't know is to ask for what we want.
Or language what the wish is.
And to language it in such a way that a person is interested in it and maybe responding to it instead of not.
And that may take a little bit because the person,
practice.
I'm frustrated with this, I'm frustrated with this, and they don't even know what they want.
Yeah.
So this is where they've got to, before it's got to get clear in their mind and make it something doable. Like don't ask for, maybe we say maybe that person can take a baby step in the direction of giving up a pattern that they have. So try to ask for something that the other person can succeed at doing. And once they do X correctly, you can come back 2 weeks later and ask a little bit more.
Yeah.
And eventually get total safety in your relationship.
Yeah. And that total safety, as you said, is necessary. So how do you increase safety? Well, another way that we found is that you can take negativity out, and we thought for several years, if you take negativity out, things are going to be fine. But what we discovered was it isn't fine, because the brain knew what to do with negativity, but it doesn't know what to do without negativity. So you have to give the brain something to do to replace negativity. And that's where we came up with, well, just being positive doesn't do it. We found the power of positive thinking is actually an illusion. But the thing to do is to affirm the other person in two ways. I affirm you because you are valuable, because you exist. I want to affirm the fact that the universe gave you to yourself and gave you to us, and your value doesn't depend on what you do for me. You're here, and I didn't have anything to do with that. So I want to affirm your being. To put it formally, I want to affirm your being, and you can make that a practice. I'm just glad, like I wrote Chris this morning, and who is Helen's nephew-in-law, who married her niece, and just said, I just want Chris to affirm the fact that you're here is a wonder.
We're part of a family-owned business, so it's business, but it was his birthday.
It was his birthday. And then the second thing is to thank them, which we call appreciation, for what they did do for you. So I appreciate, like Helen brings me a cup of coffee in the morning. It's one of the stories we tell in our workshops is I get up after she does, and I'm at the mirror trying to get my eyes open, and a cup of coffee gets put down beside me in the desk. Well, that's a something, I say, hey, well, I really appreciate that you brought me the cup of coffee. So that's an appreciation of a behavior, which is different from simply appreciating the fact that she exists. But I want to do both of those. And if Helen's brain, and by the way, this is another thing that the brain sciences have gotten really clear about now, is the brain does not see, it predicts what it's going to see. And I thought that really messes everything up. I thought all my life that the brain looks around and says, oh, there's that, there's that, there's that. No, it looks saying, wonder what's going to happen next. Well, what's going to happen next is what happened recently. So the brain predicts that what happened in the past will happen in the present and the future. So if Helen can predict, or I can predict what we're going to do, and that's going to be positive, then that way of looking at Helen, or her looking at me, is going to have that sense of safety. You know, she's going to bring me a cup of coffee. And Helen's going to experience me saying, hey, thank you, my queen. And her brain will predict my response. So what you want is, whether it's at work or in your partnership, is to be sure that the other person's brain can predict that you will be safe for them. And in order for them to do that, you have to, in fact, be safe for them, so that they have the data of your safety. They can't imagine it. They have to experience it. And then they can imagine it, and imagine that it will be repeated. So that sense of affirmation of being and appreciation of doing is the other way to create safety. And we think if you do all of that, and then we've talked a little bit about empathy. You want to talk about empathy a little bit?
I already did.
You already did.
The childhood challenge.
The childhood challenge.
I just wanted to ask you if you can dig a little bit into the Imago idea, because Helen, you just said, so when one person, when you're asking somebody for a request, then the other person can develop in that area. So where one person has their, how do you say, their leg or their potential, there the other person has the healing potential. Maybe you can dive a little bit into that, because for us it was so eye-opening, and we still live that, experience that every day when we have something. It's like, oh my God, that's something from my childhood, and then it's, oh, that's where you can grow, and vice versa. Maybe you can dive a little into that, because for us it was totally eye-opening, the idea that we attract somebody into our life, and that we have that that potential, vice versa.
Yes.
Well, we tend, growing up, to repress memories that are bad. And by high school and then college, we want to start, maybe meet somebody and start our own home and say goodbye to the home we were raised in. And we start getting college degrees and go, oh, what do I want to do professionally? And then, do I want to do something that makes a lot of money? Well, maybe I should get another degree on top of the first one I got, and I could be richer. I could make more money, and the rest of my life I'll enjoy that money coming in. But then we go, oh, and I'm supposed to have my own home and family. And so now you're free to pick a person to marry. So you try to, during time off, go to a bar, or when there's a party, or and then suddenly you don't want to just marry anyone. You want to, quote, fall in love. When you fall in love, you propose, but you have no idea that what has happened in the falling in love process, unconsciously, you've met someone that's going to replicate your childhood wound. And there have been therapies written about this, about a person needs to re-experience their childhood wound, and then it can be healed. Like it's a repressed memory in childhood. When it comes up, it can be healed by another person's embrace or acting differently. And then they don't walk around with these repressed feelings of trauma. And is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
And could I just add a little bit to that? Had you gotten to a close point? I think one of the sentences that I like to say is that all of us marry somebody who's been picked out and designed to be the source of our deepest personal growth, because they're going to ask something from us which we are in no way interested in or capable of giving. But
it's how people are wired.
But it's a part of us that didn't develop, didn't grow when we were little because of our environment. Mm-hmm. So when our partner comes along and says, would you be willing to hug me with more intensity and be more emotional? Well, I grew up where you don't hug intensely and you're not emotional. We just say, I love you. And that's,
or I'm your husband.
That's enough. I'm your husband. Don't you get it? So, but Helen says, well, would you hug me with some vigor and look me in the eye warmly?
Look like you mean it.
And look like I mean it. You mean I have to feel this stuff? Well, I grew up managing my feelings because it wasn't safe to express feelings. So she is the perfect person to call me into the undeveloped part of myself. Which is to be a feeling person who expresses emotion when I say I love you, instead of I love you, don't you get it? I gave you a car, damn it. I took you on a trip. Stuff like that.
And
so I think that's what you're referring to is that.
And what you should say to me instead is, oh, Helen, thank you for giving me an opportunity to grow.
Yes, right? And you have to thank you for giving me an opportunity to grow.
But because that's what our partners do for one another. And I think that's the point you're wanting to make sure that is stated here.
And that's the paradoxical part of the selection process. It's like nobody, I took us decades to figure that out. Why did these two people, looking at hundreds of couples, how did these two people wind up in the same relationship? And finally, in listening very carefully, we discovered that each of them married somebody similar to the caretaker with whom they had the most difficulty. Mm-hmm. And they were still trying to get what they didn't get from that caretaker, but it was all unconscious. And that person they married, being similar to the caretaker, is not capable of giving it in their present moment. But so they become aware that if they would stretch into that behavior that you are asking for, they would become something different that would be positive for themselves. And we could call it growth toward wholeness. And that was like, oh my God. So people are paired unconsciously to be just right for each other's maximal pain and suffering. And, or if they convert that, their optimal growth potential is in the relation, in the struggle is the optimal growth potential. So that the power struggle is the transition from the illusion of romantic love to the reality of real love, which is the third stage in relationship.
And I could say something that would be my closing words. So Harville talked about the part of the brain, the vagal net, and it happens spontaneously. When you get to the neocortex, there's, we call it the wise owl part of the brain, because you have to choose to get there. Doctors, left brain hemisphere, an architect, your ceiling isn't falling in right now because of a left brain person created a ceiling, and a tax collector. You don't want them to make a mistake. And so you'll say, this is the taxes you owe this year. So this is left brain stuff that's very valuable. The right brain hemisphere is also smart. It's a gut instinct way of knowing. And then the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is the healthiest part of the brain, where you don't know, you wonder. And this promotes neural integration, and it releases acetylcholine, norepinephrine, brain chemicals that make you relax. And the safety in the space between creates a different brain. When you practice the tools that create safety in the between, neuroplasticity, you are creating a better brain every day that is releasing neurochemicals that'll make you healthier. And Mayo Clinic says you have a stronger immune system to fight off COVID, and you live longer. So for your partner's sake, use the dialogue process and safe conversations or Imago therapy. But for your sake,
you get a better brain.
You will be carrying. They say in everyone's skull is a 2.8 pound organ that's the most complex organ in the universe. And what we're just teaching you is creating a healthy brain where you're going to be able to relax a lot and have hope, faith and hope, and buy into the idea of a completely different kind of global humanity.
Okay, I think that's what we know.
And we're so grateful you invited us to be with you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything you created. And I think changing that first in our intimate relationship, and then in our families, and then in our businesses, I think that's what really will make a change in the world. But we have to start first with ourselves, and then in the closest relationship, because if we don't have that safety at home, how can we bring the safety into the world? So thank you so much for also having that big vision, not only having a nicer relationship and have a little more fun, but really changing humanity as a whole and taking that in so many countries. And also with your experience and your age, that you're still going and you're still so ambitious about it and curious to learn more and to give more. So thank you so much for your great work.
And just as an advertisement, I know that you are hosting the last online couple workshop for this year. So for everyone who's interested in not just listening, but also doing it and experiencing the Imago process and all the brain science behind it and all the functions and how to create a safe space in between, not only with the dialogue, but also with the other tools, then we highly recommend the workshop.
Yes.
And we also put the link into the show notes. And
Great.
Everything that's left is just to say thank you. Thank you for bringing 6 wonderful children into the world. Now 6 grandchildren, which are also confronted with the Imago dialogue. Or with
by the way, even the little kids, our daughter, unless they use mommy, and can I share with you a frustration? If one of them whines, complains, no dessert, they have to go into the corner. They get no allowance. Like, they bribe their kids to do this. They make their kids use dialogue or no dessert for a week. No, they bribe, and then they go, okay, I'll do it. So this is how to make it work. You said the couple, the family, and organization, work, whatever. But yeah, the kids, don't think, oh, that's a little complicated for the kids. It's not. It's simple. And my daughter is thrilled. She went, Mom, thank you. All of my family is using this at home. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a happier mom.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
So thanks again. Thank you also to the audience, to the listeners who stick with us with the English. And thanks to you, Helen. Thanks to you, Harville, for your wonderful work. And all the best for all upcoming missions, for all your aims and goals. And bringing the Imago out into the world and to all the countries that are left still. Yeah.
Thank you. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Bye.